So one of the things that we did in preparing for this colloquium, because we had our own searches that we wanted to show you what, we contacted 3 scholars, let them loose on a prototype version of the portal, and asked them to tell us how this might or might not affect the way that they will teach and conduct their research in the future. So we're really thrilled to have these 3 scholars and teachers here with us today. The first is Jensen, who is a professor in the art history department at the University of California, Santa Barbara. She's an expert, a well-known expert in 17th century Dutch art, visual culture and the history of science, early modern gender studies, and portraiture. And I'm just going to let Anne loose and have her show you what she thinks of the portal.
Thanks so much. Well, I think the portal is an extraordinary tool. My enthusiasm for text digitally available on the internet has been increasingly tempered by their overwhelming numbers. I know you've shared my experience of adding bookmark after bookmark after bookmark as institutions put digital material online. While it's marvelous to have on my desktop the full text of an auction catalog or a fundamental treatise, as I actually try to find these on the internet, I often feel like I'm wandering among the monsters of Renaissance pleasure gardens. Out of this chaos, the Getty Research Portal is going to fundamentally change the kinds of research we're able to do. I have just concluded an enormously productive 5 weeks here at the GRI Library, working on a biography and catalogue raisonné of the Dutch 17th century portrait painter Thomas de Keyser. Digital resources have permitted me to ask and to answer new questions. I'd like to share with you 2 examples, one in the history of collecting and taste, and the other a cultural turning point in presentation of self by a new class of art patrons, the middle-class Dutch merchant. I've recently located de Keyser's portrait of fellow artist David Bailly, in part doing internet research, which in 1941 had disappeared into Hermann Göring's personal collection. Tracing its history through sales catalogs has also been a painstaking task. Many 17th and 18th century catalogs survive in only 1 or 2 copies, scattered in libraries across Europe. For more than a century, art historians have traveled from library to library, using these published descriptions to help reconstruct provenance history. Even more valuable, however, are handwritten annotations in the margins recording the sales price and buyer. By making available digital copies of these catalogs through a single search engine, the Getty Research Portal will make possible even richer analyses. At the moment, the portal contains 34 sales catalogs from before 1800. This number will grow exponentially. I here demonstrate the research possibilities with screenshots of catalogs from an online collection published by Brill, available here at the GRI. These early catalogs have permitted me to trace an appreciation for de Keyser and his work in particular, and this work in particular, from the late 18th century. His name had been lost to history by 1776, when the painting was described as by a broth or worthy master. In 1807, the painting went under the name of Thomas's famous father, the architect Hendrik de Keyser. Already, however, the market appreciation for the painting had skyrocketed as it sold for 60 guilders, more than twice that of any other painting in the sale. Just 4 years later, it sold for 200 francs, 3.5 times more than Vermeer's Made Asleep, now at the Metropolitan Museum in New York. In 1813, it was again the highest-grossing painting in its sale. The politics of taste by which Vermeer and other artists subsequently eclipsed de Keyser has yet to be written, but this kind of information, brought together in digitized sales catalogs, is making this possible. My second example concerns the cultural roots of a particular format, the so-called conversation piece, popular into the middle of the 19th century. I show you Johann Zoffany's Gore family about 1775. The format has three essential qualities: figures in full length, arranged in a domestic setting, on a small panel or canvas. These paintings were inspired by the quintessential 17th century Dutch image, small-scale portraits of Dutch burghers in richly appointed interiors. On the basis of surviving paintings, this modest little fellow seems to be ground zero for this format. Thanks to GRI resources, together with my own archival data, just last week I was able to identify this little guy as de Keyser's childhood neighbor and friend, Jan Soap. Painted with loving attention down to his protruding canine tooth, his companion must also be a portrait. The life-size, full-length portrait, particularly with the hunting dog, had a long-standing tradition as the mark of royalty. Titian's portrait of Charles V is a well-known example. This full-length format was adopted in 17th century Holland, however, by a new class, the middle-class merchant. Most notable is its scale. This portrait and the tradition which followed are on supports less than a third the size of the royal counterparts. Now, my research question. I wanted to know what contemporaneous texts could tell us about how 17th century patrons understood and valued the full-length portrait. I turned to Karel van Mander, the Dutch Vasari, who in 1604 published an art treatise accompanied by biographies that include extensive descriptions of works of art. I typed Van Mander into the Getty Research Portal, and the first hit was a digitized version of the original edition. To my pleasure and astonishment, this copy is located in the Hathi Digital Library. Unbeknownst to me, this volume is also available for download through my university library catalog, but buried in the databases. While the University of California at Santa Barbara is paying for this resource, I only discovered I had access to it through the Getty Digital Portal. As it turns out, the searchable plain text for the moment is garbled. 17th century font is not easily read by optical character recognition programs. It has, however, been transcribed into searchable text by a Dutch digitizing project. The gold mine of information that this provides highlights the new kinds of research that texts accessible through the Getty Digital Portal will in the future make possible. In the early modern period, portraits were considered transcriptive rather than inventive. They ranked low in the academic hierarchy of genres. On the basis of one phrase taken out of context, it's always been said that Van Mander disparaged the genre. But a search through the 600 pages of Van Mander's lives for the words Konterfeite and Konterfeitsel yields 89 hits, every one of them glowing with praise for the portrait described. Now, de Keyser's painting is, to my knowledge, the earliest known full-length portrait of a non-noble Dutch sitter, or standee, as he probably should be described. I wanted to know if Van Mander could tell us how rare or common the full-length portrait actually was, and how they were valued. According to Van Mander's text, they were rare. The author describes ten voeten uit, or to the feet, by just 6 artists, only 2 of which are Dutch. Of these, several depict English noblemen passing through Holland, and 2 portray Dutch nobility. Only one pair in the entire volume is described as depicting a Dutch couple in full length, although they're lost to us today. But these and every one of the others mentioned by Van Dyck are described so groot as leven, or as life-sized. While absence does not always provide positive data, these textual searches underscore that de Keyser's full-length small-scale portrait of Jan Soap may indeed be the remarkably inventive image that the visual record suggests. This and subsequent full-length small-scale domestic portraits demonstrate that during the economic and social turmoil of the 1620s, individuals in the Netherlands were actively deploying inventive portrait formats to fashion a new stature for themselves as they took the political helm of their infant republic. The Getty Research Portal is going to fundamentally change the kinds of research questions we can ask at both the micro level of individual lives as well as the macro level of culture and politics. While development energy is understandably focused upon enlarging the database, as we've heard this morning, to me, the most serious challenge facing all knowledge portals in the future is going to be organization. How and what kinds of filters we use to sort the massive amount of material we're putting online. On behalf of all of us, I want to thank the Getty Research Institute for this extraordinary project and for beginning this conversation. Thank you.
Boy, oh boy, do I owe this woman a drink or what? Fabulous presentation. And you brought out some really good points I wanted to mention too. You know, that image that Anne showed at the Nazi collecting point with Goering, we actually have that image in our photo study collection, but we're not talking about images right now, Thomas. Another slide that I really liked that you did, Anne, was showing the scale. That is something that is so important, and we even had a scholars panel on this at the GRI last year, because, you know, when students look at things in books, and now especially with digital, everything seems like it's the same size. So this idea of rendering scale, we've also got, you know, the Amber's catalog that we're doing now, the Getty Museum. They're these tiny little objects like this, but in this beautiful online catalog where you can spin the object around and so forth, they look gorgeous, but they take up the whole screen. So the team is working on maybe using something like an image of a thumb or something included with the image of the object so that the user can get an idea of the actual size of these objects. So that was an important thing. And then, as you noticed, the copy of Van Mander that Anne found in the portal linked to the Avery copy at the Hathi Trust. So this is just an idea of how we can link out to anything as long as it's, well, actually, this was a good example because she got to the Hathi Trust, you couldn't download the whole thing at that point, but then she found out that her library subscribes to the Hathi Trust, so she can actually get it. I remember the day that you told me, oh my God, I didn't know that I could get a whole copy of Van Mander digitally, so that was exciting. And then one other important thing is optical character recognition, again, is not a magic bullet. And especially for these early texts, the optical character recognition, or OCR, it's almost useless, frankly. So there are other issues that we have to deal with when dealing with historic text. Our next speaker is my friend Irina Costache, who is a professor in the art department at California State University, Channel Islands. Irina specializes in 20th century art and critical theory, and she's going to show us how she would use the portal.
Thank you, Martha. First, I'd like to thank the GRI for including me in this testing of this new and very exciting research project, and for inviting me to share my thoughts with you today. To summarize, I think it's absolutely a fantastic project, just in its beginning, but absolutely fantastic. And I would like to use a quote that I just actually thought as these questions were coming up by Leon Battista Alberti, who wrote in his 1436 book on painting, "Nothing can be new and perfect at the same time." So I think we need to look at the portal from that perspective. What I find so extraordinary about the portal is, I think, two major issues that seem to be almost incompatible on a certain level. On one hand, it is an extraordinary, effective, and smart way of using digital media. These are links. They're not hosting. They're not downloading. So it is an effective way of using the internet for what it really is. The second one, it has to do with the audiences. On a superficial level, this seems to be a project for senior scholars, advanced art historical research, and indeed it is. But being open and being available to really anyone who has an internet connection, it is really a project that is allowing anyone to look into texts that were, until very recently, reserved to the very few who could not only read foreign languages, but actually travel to faraway places. So from that perspective, I really look at the portal as in a conceptual way, as a digital, if you want, version of the French encyclopedia, an equalizer of our historical knowledge in the 21st century. And again, let's keep in mind, this is just the beginning and a very exciting and extraordinary one. I wanted to share with you today just a few things that I've done. Some are a little bit redundant because you had an opportunity to see some demonstrations as to how I used it and also how some of the teaching tools that this project would provide. As you already have heard, there are incredible opportunities to tailor your research in terms of the tools, the filters that you have access to, the various institutions, which again, we just heard, they're only gonna enhance the numbers. Once you get to the document that you are interested in, you have an enormous amount of tools in terms of citation, in terms of sharing, in terms of downloading. Downloading books is just, it really seems almost science fiction. I think 25 years ago, this would have really seemed to be a very interesting, but something that really couldn't happen in the very near future. And I'm not gonna go over the same processes that you have seen. But what I liked very much about this portal, and I'm a very visual person, I like to be able to explore. What I was looking specifically when I was doing this testing is books prior to photography, books about art history prior to photography. So my main interest was to find out how much illustration and what kind of illustrations. So this mapping, what I call of the book, which in real life, as you well know, you won't be able to do it in a library, allowed me very quickly to see how many images are available. And precisely this mapping, I came across coincidentally, which is one of another great features I'll mention in a second, in the portal, I came across a guide of the Louvre from 1904. And my interest in the definition of masterpiece, obviously, the Mona Lisa, kind of piqued my interest in looking, what is it being said about Mona Lisa? I was able to immediately ascertain that it's not reproduced. It's not one of the paintings included in Northern Europe, Italian art. But it's also mentioned, you probably won't be able, it's just literally listed. So it's quite interesting to see that in 1904, it was not the highlight of a trip to Paris and the Louvre. So this is a feature that became very quick to look at. What I like to call the portal is creating this global 24/7 art historian. I just want to remind everybody, I did all this research from my home in Santa Monica, doing other things in between, leaving the stuff, coming back. I'm sure I'm not the only one in this room who remembers last century, and I'm referring to the 20th, not the 19th century. Research, we all went prepared with long lists of very well-organized bibliographies to Europe. I did a lot of research in Italy, only to discover they have these obscure holidays and libraries were closed. They had extended lunches, and you have to be very creative to figure out. I was able to kind of talk my way into waiting for them inside the libraries. Books being restored for years. And many more similar impediments to do research. That's no longer the case. What I found extraordinary, and this is definitely something for the future, is the ability you get actually suggestions for other books that you may not have looked at. But the portal is an incredible opportunity to develop online collaboration, scholarly dialogues, literally creating a new environment for digital art history, including hybrid publications. I have a lot more, but I have very little time. I am speaking today not only as an art historian, but also as a faculty, and I profoundly value my role, not only in teaching future artists and art historians, but also having taught many non-majors, understanding from their perspective how art and art history is seen from the outside the discipline. And very often I realize that art is often perceived as fluff and feelings. I think Portal makes this literally at all levels of education makes art serious, relevant, important. It creates really for these new audiences a new opportunity, and I could easily just insert a link in any presentation. The use of social media, just recognizing the symbols of Facebook and Twitter, is just going to create a link with the new audiences. It's the best advertising for incentive for art history study in a new way, not necessarily in the traditional way. And finally, creating a sense of immediacy and ownership. This is a sort of a manual about art that would be fantastic in any art critique, and it is a 17th century text. I wanted just very briefly, because my time is limited, to show some of the places that I went. This is a book on an interdisciplinary art history course with painting and literature, and these are some of the texts. I was surprised to discover that the term modern was really about Baroque, even though it's 18th century. A dictionary of the Académie des Beaux-Arts, which included a complete list of all its members. I was surprised that in a dictionary that would be available. A book prior to photography that includes basically prints as a way of illustrating art history. But I want to go to, I guess, the first book of reproduction of Rembrandt, which I was amazed that instead of using paintings, they're actually using prints, which are already black and white, which in itself, it's quite interesting to see this transition. Obviously, there was a level of discomfort of publishing in black and white images that were known as being in color. But as I said, what I value tremendously is the digital opportunities this format offers. So I was looking specifically at text where the form, the layout of the page is also innovative. Made it a little bit more difficult because the keywords are really not lending to that kind of research. I came across to this early 17th century book, and I think it will immediately, the book is on perspective, but what I was interested here and what my research is concerned with right now is new forms of writing within a digital environment. And I came across this text. I was kind of assuming that something on perspective would have more illustration, and my interest is indeed of seeing how in the past text and images have been addressed. And you can see, again, how you can literally, what I say, mapping, quite extraordinary. It's hard to believe this is 1625. And what makes it so extraordinary, and this is, I think, one of the perfect examples how the portal serves not only the advanced art historians, but also a wider, broader, and very diverse audience. Because this is a text I definitely am going to use in working on digital media, the format of digital media, fragmentation of text. But because my initial field was Italian futurism, and the text in the middle is an Italian text, it is an incredible reminder that, I hope I get there, 300 years before futurism and Bauhaus, and 400 years before the web, some people really came up with a lot of the ideas we think they are just coming up right now. And this would be a fantastic, absolutely, in fact, and I know there are some of my colleagues in the room from my university and other university. This is a perfect example, not only to share with in my art history classes, modern, postmodern, but also in graphic and web design. So I think my time is almost up. So I just want to end by saying this is a fantastic project, and the portal really lives up to its name, a truly new path in digital art history. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Irina, for a great presentation. And you gave me the text for my second tattoo of the day, which is the Leon Battista Alberti quote, "Nothing can be new and perfect at the same time." So that might fit there. Our third scholar presenter, whom we're thrilled to have here from the University of Oregon, Stephanie Wood. She teaches in the history department at the University of Oregon, where she specializes in the histories of indigenous peoples of Mesoamerica. She's also the director of the Wired Humanities Projects at the University of Oregon, and one of those projects is called Digital Mesoamerica. Stephanie?
Thank you so much. It's an honor and it's humbling to be here with you today. Thank you so much to the Getty for inviting me to experience this exciting day, the launch of this wonderful new research tool, and to give you just a glimpse of how I would use it in my research. So first I'm going to just, briefly explain, well, this is a problem, technology. Anyway, we have these digital Mesoamerican projects. We also have Islamic and European and East Asian projects in the center where I'm working. But my own research is on Mesoamerica, so I'm sharing with you examples from this work. One of our projects funded by the NEH is pictorial manuscripts authored by indigenous communities in early Mesoamerica, 16th through 18th century. We call this the Mapas project, and mapa didn't necessarily mean map as we know it today, but pictorial manuscripts of many different kinds. And in this online digital collection, it's open source and free because your tax dollars paid for it through NEH. We have the whole, you can see the whole manuscript and many of its details with annotation attached. So just a glimpse of the kind of thing we're doing. And there are three ways to get at the details, either selecting from left-hand sort of textual labels for the details, or across the top a visual selection of the details, or also you can scan over the entire manuscript and details will highlight and you can click on those. So there are a number of ways to get to the material. And where there's a text, you also have transcription and translation. These are in indigenous languages, so you have translation right now to English and Spanish. So we're very interested in both the imagery and the texts. And this is also reflected in another project that we have, which has funding from NEH and the NSF. This is an online free Aztec language dictionary, the Nahuatl dictionary, which has 3 interfaces in Spanish, English, and Nahuatl. First time ever that there's a dictionary for native speakers with definitions in their own language, not just in translation. The kind of interesting thing about this dictionary is that we are including pictography, so it's not purely textual but also visual, and we have audio and video as well, so it's very multimedia, and we're coming to the end of our 3rd year, but we have almost 30,000 headwords, but it's still, there's a lot of work to go. But here's just a quick example, a pictograph of the word tekpatl, which means flint or obsidian blade. And you can just see from looking at the visuals, there's a lot going on here. This is more than just an obsidian point. It's dressed up, it has a face, and you're like, oh, what's that about? So an example of what we're doing in the database under the headword tekpatl is pulling examples from manuscripts to show its multiple meanings or its many layered meanings. And so we right now, in the example you're seeing, we have examples from indigenous language manuscripts with English translations and also with Spanish translations. And what we want to add to this would be French and German and other languages where people have studied or translated the manuscripts. So now turning to your wonderful portal, just to show you an example of a keyword search of Mexico brings up 107 items. Of course, there are many other ways to get additional materials, but here's just, scrolling through those, I found a work that I knew would have Nahuatl, the Aztec language, in it, and did a keyword search and found, for example, tekpatl, and so this is, in French, it tells us that flint was a symbol of volcanic power. So I think that adds a lot to the meaning, to our understanding of the meaning of the term. And so there's just, a wonderful example where I would like to now harvest this example for our online dictionary and, point to this wonderful resource for people who want to read further. And if you just glance through the pages, you'll find many, many, many other examples of these the terms and concepts that we are probing in what we call the new philology, of looking for examples of terms in their context to gain new understanding. Another thing I wanted to just share with you briefly is because we have a number of digital projects, I have a tiny hope for collaboration with the Getty. So for example, we have a portal we created in the late 1990s, first years of the 2000s. And this is a focused portal for people who do research on pre-Columbian studies, particularly with attention to Mesoamerica, pre-Columbian colonial. And so, for instance, we have full-text, free, open-access articles in one of the many databases that this portal provides. And just to show an example of the full-text materials, we have indexed Mexicon, which is a German journal of Mesoamerican studies. We actually digitized it for them and with their permission and put it online, and then we indexed it with our portal. And perhaps some of these things would fit into the Getty portal as well. FAMSI, which is now located here, came from Florida to LA, and they have research reports, many of which have art historical content, and I'm just wondering if you want to get together with FAMSI. It sounds like you probably already have talked to them somewhat, to perhaps pull some of their materials into your portal. Other items that we have in links to, again, not all of the content that's free and online from this journal will have art historical content, so I'm just interested to know, how to work together to identify those materials that could be useful to you and feed them to you from our databases, if you're interested in journal articles and beyond books at some point. So I understand you have a conference coming up on color, so I just threw in this example from another journal that has its full text free online. We also have, and now this is moving away from Mesoamerica, but just a couple of examples of colleagues I know who are creating digital collections free online, and this Renaissance Editions is 222 titles currently, all in English, but from the 15th through the 18th centuries. And many of them could have art historical importance to you, so I could work with my colleague who heads this project up and ask him if he could identify some of his online books that might be useful to you. And he has the metadata, he's made it very clear, but I was just imagining, how not only to give you the links, but how to map out our metadata systems with yours so that they would feed electronically very smoothly into your portal. Women Writers Online is the project of colleagues at Brown University, and they have 326 full texts that they've digitized from 16th through the 19th centuries. And I just for fun did a little keyword search of painting and found 76 of their 326 electronic books are, have that content, and they show you multiple appearances, in fact. So that might be a way to help identify books that could be fed into your portal. And then just finally, and this is supposed to be a humorous final slide, to show you that some people online are inviting contributions and then giving you specific instructions about how, if you want to suggest materials to add to an online portal, how to do that. And I was talking with Mirtha briefly about how you could put up a template for metadata so that you get it in the form that you need it. And anyway, lots of details that we could discuss later, but there's my little tidbit. Again, just to summarize, I feel like a child in a candy shop. I am so excited by the Getty portal and the potential for the kinds of research that I do and my students and my colleagues. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. Boy, she is a member of our advisory committee now, too, which we're having a meeting tomorrow. So she's already given us a lot of good ideas about thinking about the scope and building up the material and making it more diverse.